He thought his late wife's classic car was safely sitting in the garage until one morning, it vanished. His own son had secretly sold it for a trip to Paris. But when a mysterious dealer called and revealed hidden letters inside the car, an old family secret began to unravel, and someone would do anything to keep it buried. Subscribe to Calm Dad Stories and discover emotional family dramas filled with secrets, betrayal, and unexpected twists. I never imagined that the last thing connecting me to my late wife would disappear on an ordinary Sunday morning. My name is Selim Viridian Hale. I am 64 years old, retired, and living alone in Brindle Cove, a small coastal town where most people still know each other by name. The house I live in is the same one my wife and I bought nearly 30 years ago. The paint is faded, the wooden porch creaks whenever I step onto it, and the garden no longer looks as lively as it once did. Ever since my wife, Alira Solen Hale, passed away 11 months earlier, silence had become my closest companion. People often say grief becomes easier with time. I do not believe that. You simply become better at carrying it. Every Sunday had become a ritual for me. I would wake before sunrise, make black coffee exactly the way Alira liked it, even though she was no longer there to drink it, and then walk toward the detached garage behind our house. That garage had become a museum of memories. Alira spent 25 years restoring her beloved 1967 Aston Veritas coupe. She never cared about its market value. She cared about every scratch, every bolt, every piece of chrome she had carefully polished with her own hands. I still remembered how she looked whenever she worked on that car. Her hair tied back, grease on her cheek, her old radio playing soft jazz. She always smiled whenever she opened the hood. Sometimes I would simply sit nearby and watch her work for hours. Those memories had become precious after her death, which was why that Sunday morning became the worst morning I had experienced since losing her. I opened the garage door and froze. The space where the Aston always sat was empty. At first, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. I blinked several times. The toolbox was there. The shelves were there. The old stool where Alira used to sit was there. But the car was gone. My heartbeat suddenly accelerated. No. I stepped inside. Perhaps I had forgotten. Perhaps someone had borrowed it. Perhaps this was some misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew something was terribly wrong. I immediately looked around. Nothing else had been taken. No signs of forced entry. No broken locks. No damaged windows. The garage was perfectly clean. Too clean. Then I noticed tire marks leading toward the driveway. Someone had driven the car away. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands. There was only one person who still possessed a spare key. My son, Lysander Hale. I called him immediately. He answered after several rings. Dad. His voice sounded calm. Far too calm. Lys, I said quietly. Where is your mother's car? A brief silence followed. Then he sighed. I was going to tell you. The blood drained from my face. Tell me what? I sold it. For several seconds, I could not speak. The words simply echoed inside my head. I sold it. I looked once more at the empty garage. My knees suddenly felt weak. You what? I sold the Aston. I leaned against the workbench. Lys, that car belonged to your mother. I know. You had no right. It was just sitting there. I closed my eyes. Just sitting there. Those words hurt more than I expected. To him, it was merely an old vehicle. To me, it was the last place where I could still feel my wife's presence. Why? I finally asked. Another pause. Then he exhaled. Vesper and I are leaving for Paris. I frowned. Paris? For a year, maybe longer. I slowly lowered myself onto the old stool. When exactly were you planning to tell me this? We didn't want to worry you. We. Me and Vesper. I suddenly felt an uncomfortable sensation in my chest. I had met Vesper Thorne only a few times. She was elegant, intelligent, and always seemed perfectly composed. But something about her had always unsettled me. She asked strange questions. Questions about family assets. Questions about Alira's collections. Questions about old documents. At the time, I dismissed my concerns as paranoia. Now I was no longer certain. How much did you sell it for? I asked. Liz hesitated. Enough. Liz. He finally mentioned the amount. I nearly dropped my phone. It was far below the car's actual value. Far below. No serious collector would have accepted such a price. Unless the buyer had been in a hurry. Or unless my son had been desperate. Who bought it? A dealership owner in Connecticut. Name. Why does it matter? Because your mother's estate hasn't even been fully settled. Silence. For the first time, I sensed uncertainty in his voice. What do you mean? I stared at the empty space where the Aston had once stood. The ownership documents are incomplete. What? You sold something that legally wasn't yours. Another long silence followed. Then he spoke again. Dad, please don't make this into something bigger than it is. I felt anger rising inside me. Bigger than it is? My wife had spent 25 years restoring that car. She had protected it like a member of our family. And now it was gone. Why Paris? I asked quietly. His answer came immediately. Because Vesper wants to start a new life there. I said nothing. Then he added words that would remain with me for a long time. Mom would have wanted us to move forward. I slowly looked around the silent garage. At the tools. At the unfinished notes. At the coffee mug Elira had forgotten to wash. No, I whispered. What? Your mother would never have wanted this. Before he could answer, I ended the call. The garage became silent once again. I sat there for a long time. Minutes passed. Perhaps an hour. I honestly could not tell. Then my phone rang. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. I almost ignored it. Almost. Finally, I answered. A deep male voice spoke. Mr. Hale? Yes. My name is Cedric Morrow. I frowned. I own Morrow Vintage Motors in Connecticut. I slowly stood up. My heart suddenly began beating faster. I believe I recently purchased your late wife's Aston. I stared at the phone in silence. For several seconds, I wondered whether I had heard the man correctly. Something inside the car? My wife had owned that Aston for 25 years. I knew every visible inch of it. Or, at least I thought I did. What do you mean? I finally asked. The man on the other end lowered his voice. I would rather explain in person, Mr. Hale. I am not driving 6 hours without an explanation. A short pause followed. Then he sighed. One of my mechanics discovered a hidden compartment beneath the rear seats. I tightened my grip on the phone. A hidden compartment? Yes. I slowly sat back down on the stool. Elira never mentioned such a thing. Not once. What was inside it? There was another long pause. Several envelopes. I frowned. Envelopes. They appear to be old. Some of them are addressed to you. My breathing became shallow. Addressed to me? My mind immediately filled with questions. Had Elira hidden letters from me? Why would she do such a thing? And why inside the car? Is that all? I asked. No. The man's answer came quietly. There were photographs and documents as well. I closed my eyes. This made even less sense. Elira was organized. Extremely organized. She kept records of everything. Receipts. Maintenance logs. Insurance papers. If she wanted me to have something, she would have simply placed it in her study, not hidden it inside a car. I'll come, I finally said. I think that's best. Before ending the call, the man added one final sentence. And, Mr. Hale, I don't think your son knew these items existed. After the call ended, I remained motionless. The cold morning air entered through the half-open garage door. For the first time that day, my anger toward Liz weakened slightly. Perhaps he had acted foolishly. Perhaps he had been irresponsible. But there was something else happening here. Something none of us understood. A few hours later, I packed an overnight bag and left Brindle Cove. The drive to Connecticut felt much longer than usual. Rain clouds slowly gathered overhead as I followed the interstate south. The radio remained off. I preferred silence. During the journey, memories of Elira continuously returned. I remembered the first day she bought the Aston. It had been little more than rust and broken parts. Everyone told her the restoration was impossible. She simply smiled. Then I'll take my time. 25 years. 25 years of patience. Countless evenings spent in that garage. How many secrets had she carried during all that time? As evening approached, I finally arrived in Hartford. Morrow Vintage Motors was located on the outskirts of the city. The dealership looked more like a museum than a business. Classic vehicles filled the large showroom. Every car appeared immaculate. A tall man with gray hair stood near the entrance. As soon as I stepped out of my vehicle, he approached me. "Mr. Hale?" "Yes." He extended his hand. "Cedric Morrow." I shook it. His expression was serious but kind. "Thank you for coming." I looked past him. "Where's the car?" He gestured toward a large maintenance building behind the showroom. "This way." We walked in silence. I immediately noticed that several mechanics were carefully working on various vintage automobiles. Then I saw it. Alira's Aston. It stood beneath bright overhead lights. For a moment, emotion overwhelmed me. I had expected relief. Instead, I felt sadness. Without Alira standing beside it, the car somehow looked lonely. I slowly approached and placed my hand on the hood. The paint was still perfect. I could almost hear her voice. "Don't lean too hard on it, Selim." I swallowed hard. Cedric gave me time before speaking again. "We haven't altered anything." I nodded silently. He then opened the rear passenger door. One of the seats had been removed. Beneath it was a small metal compartment. I stared at it in disbelief. I never knew this existed. "Neither did your son," based on his reaction. I looked at him. "You met him?" Cedric nodded. He seemed eager to complete the sale. "Did he mention Paris?" A strange expression crossed Cedric's face. "Actually, no." I frowned. "He didn't."
No.
That immediately bothered me. Liz had insisted the money was for Paris. Then why had he seemed so anxious to sell the car immediately? Cedric walked toward a nearby desk. A small wooden box rested upon it. I placed everything here. He carefully opened the lid. Inside were old photographs, documents, and several sealed envelopes. My name appeared on nearly all of them. Selim Viridian Hale. Written in Alira's handwriting. My chest tightened. I slowly picked up the first envelope. The date written on the back shocked me. 7 years earlier. Another was dated 5 years earlier. Another only 2 years ago. She had been writing these letters for years.
Why?
My hands trembled. "There's something else," Cedric suddenly said. I looked up. He seemed uncertain. "What is it?" He hesitated. "When your son sold the car, someone called the dealership less than an hour later." I frowned. "Who?" "A woman." My stomach tightened. What did she want? Cedric's expression darkened. She specifically asked whether we had inspected the rear seating compartment. For several seconds, I could not speak. How could she know about it? "That's precisely why I called you." A cold sensation spread through my body. Only a few people even knew the car had been sold. Even fewer could possibly know about a hidden compartment. I slowly looked back at the envelopes. Then at Cedric. "Did she give her name?" He nodded. "Yes." I already knew the answer before he said it. Vesper Thorne. The room suddenly felt colder. I remembered every strange question she had asked over the past year. Questions about old documents. Questions about Alira's collections. Questions about family records. At the time, I thought she was simply trying to know our family better. Now I was no longer sure. Cedric carefully folded his arms. "Mr. Hale, I think the sale of this car may not have been an accident." I stared at the letters in silence. Then I slowly picked up the first envelope. Whatever answers existed, they had been left by my wife. And after 11 months of mourning, I was suddenly terrified to discover what secrets she had been carrying all along. For a long time, I simply stared at the envelopes. My own name, written in Alira's neat handwriting, felt strangely unfamiliar. She had been gone for almost a year. I had already accepted that there would be no more conversations, no more quiet evenings drinking tea together, no more moments where she would suddenly smile at me over her glasses while repairing some old machine. Yet somehow, she was still speaking to me. Through letters. Letters she had hidden inside a car. Cedric quietly stepped away and gave me space. My hands trembled as I carefully opened the first envelope. Inside was a single folded page. I immediately recognized her handwriting. Elegant. Precise. I took a deep breath and began reading. Selim, if you are reading this, circumstances have forced the truth into the open sooner than I hoped. Please do not become angry immediately. There are things about the Aston that I never told you. I stopped reading. A strange heaviness settled in my chest. Never told me? Alira and I had been married for nearly 4 decades. There were no secrets between us. At least that was what I had always believed. I continued. When my father died, he left me more than this car. He left me responsibility. Several people have searched for this vehicle over the years. If anyone suddenly becomes interested in purchasing it, you must be careful. I slowly lowered the paper. Several people? Searching for the car? I looked toward the Aston. For 25 years, I had considered it little more than my wife's beloved project. Now it suddenly felt like something entirely different. I resumed reading. There are records hidden inside this vehicle. They concern events that happened many years ago. I promised my father that I would protect them until I understood who could be trusted. I swallowed hard. Records? What records? At the bottom of the page, another sentence had been added. If the car is ever sold unexpectedly, it means someone has finally found what they have been seeking. I looked up. Cedric was watching me carefully. What does it say? He asked softly. I slowly handed him the letter. His expression became increasingly serious as he read. This doesn't sound like ordinary family documents. No, I replied quietly. It doesn't. I reached for another envelope. This one had been written 5 years earlier. Inside were several photographs. I spread them across the desk. Most were old black and white pictures. One showed Alira standing beside her father when she was perhaps 16 years old. Another showed several men inside what appeared to be an automobile workshop. Then I noticed something unusual. One of the men had his face crossed out with dark ink. I frowned. Who is this? Cedric leaned closer. No idea. There was another folded paper beneath the photographs. I opened it. Selim, you once asked me why I never sold the Aston despite receiving several generous offers. I lied when I said it was because of sentimental value. That was only part of the truth. I could feel my heartbeat increasing. 3 years ago, someone contacted me again. He offered an absurd amount of money for the car. When I refused, he began asking questions about my father's records. I immediately looked up. Someone had been pressuring Alira, and she had never told me.
Why?
The letter continued. I feared involving you. I believed I could resolve this alone. Perhaps that was foolish. I closed my eyes briefly.
Yes.
It had been foolish. Not because she lacked courage, but because she had carried all of this by herself. Another sentence caught my attention. The man mentioned a family named Thorne. My entire body became still.
Thorne.
Vesper's surname. I read the line again to make sure I had not misunderstood.
No.
It was clearly written.
Thorne.
Cedric looked at me. You know that name? I nodded slowly. My son's fiancé. His expression immediately changed. That's impossible. I wish it were. Suddenly, countless memories returned. Vesper asking unusual questions. Vesper showing interest in the garage. Vesper once asking whether Alira had left behind journals or records. At the time, I had assumed she was simply trying to understand our family history. Now, every conversation felt different. Calculated. Intentional. I opened another envelope. This one appeared newer. Perhaps only 2 years old. The letter inside was much shorter. Selim, if someone named Thorne ever attempts to obtain this vehicle, do not trust their intentions. My father feared that one day his past would return to us. I pray he was wrong. I felt cold. Very cold. Because that future had already arrived. And somehow my son had become part of it. I sat down heavily. The room suddenly seemed smaller. Cedric slowly folded his arms. Do you think your son knows any of this? I immediately shook my head. No, you sound certain. I am. Liz could be impulsive, naive, sometimes selfish, but he was not manipulative. He would never intentionally betray his mother, which meant someone had likely manipulated him. And there was only one person who fit that possibility. Vesper. I suddenly remembered something. When exactly did she call you? Cedric thought for a moment. Approximately 40 minutes after your son left. 40 minutes. He nodded. She seemed anxious. What did she say? Cedric looked uncomfortable. She specifically asked whether any documents had been discovered. I stared at him. Those exact words. Yes. A chill ran down my spine. She had not asked about the car. Not about the transaction. Not even about payment. She wanted documents. That meant she already knew something had been hidden inside. The question was,
How?
I looked at the photographs again. Then my eyes stopped on one particular image. In the corner stood a young man wearing a dark jacket. I leaned closer. My breathing slowed. There was something strangely familiar about his face. Cedric noticed. What is it? I picked up the picture. I've seen this man before. Where? I hesitated. Then realization struck me. On Vesper's engagement announcement. In one of her family photographs. The man looked older now, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The man in this old picture was Vesper's father. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Cedric broke the silence. Mr. Hale. I slowly lowered the photograph. For several seconds, I could not answer. I simply stood beside the Aston while my son's words echoed in my mind. Vesper had disappeared. And before leaving, she had asked about hidden papers. Everything suddenly felt connected. Liz, I said quietly, where are you right now? At my apartment. Stay there. Dad, what's happening? I looked at Cedric. His expression alone told me that he already understood the seriousness of the situation. I'll explain everything later. Dad. Do not leave your apartment. I ended the call. Cedric slowly exhaled. So she knows. I nodded. Yes. And now she knows that your son doesn't have the documents. I looked down at the letters. For the first time, I began to fear what might happen next. Because desperate people often made dangerous decisions. Cedric rubbed his chin. We should contact the authorities. Not yet. He looked surprised. Why not? I picked up another photograph from the desk. Because something still didn't make sense. If Vesper's family had been searching for these documents for years, why had they suddenly become active now?
Why now?
Why after Alira's death? Why after nearly 25 years? I turned over one of the photographs. Something was written on the back. October 14th, 1998. Storage Unit 42. Do not trust anyone from Belmere. I frowned. Belmere? Cedric leaned closer. That's a town in Vermont. I looked at him. You know it. I used to purchase vehicles there years ago. A strange feeling settled inside me. Storage Unit 42. Another clue. Another secret. Alira had left breadcrumbs. She had expected someone to follow them. Or perhaps she had expected me to. I carefully opened another envelope. This one contained only a single page. Selim. If events ever become dangerous, there is one place you must visit. Belmere. My father left something there long ago. Do not go alone. I slowly lowered the paper. Cedric looked at me. I suppose we're going to Vermont. I almost smiled. Almost. But my thoughts immediately returned to Liz. I had been angry with him. Deeply angry. Yet now I could see that he had merely been used. Manipulated. Perhaps even deceived for years. I suddenly remembered something. When did Liz and Vesper start dating? Cedric looked confused. I have no idea. I took out my phone and checked old messages. 3 years. Exactly 3 years. The same year Alira mentioned being contacted again. A cold shiver passed through me.
No.
That could not be coincidence. My wife had been approached by someone connected to the Thorne family. Soon afterward, my son had begun dating Vesper. The timing was too perfect. Too deliberate. Cedric's face slowly darkened. You think she targeted him? I looked up. Yes. Neither of us spoke. The possibility was horrifying. What if Vesper had entered our lives intentionally? What if every dinner, every smile, every kind gesture had simply been part of a long plan? I suddenly felt exhausted. Not physically, emotionally. Because if that was true, then my son had not simply made a foolish decision. He had become a victim. At that exact moment, my phone rang again. Liz. I answered immediately. Dad. His voice sounded strange. Fearful. What happened? I think someone was here. I straightened. What? I just found my apartment door partially open. A chill went through me. Were you inside?
No.
Good. I glanced at Cedric. He immediately understood. Liz, listen to me carefully. Leave immediately. What is happening? Go somewhere public. Dad.
Now.
I heard hurried footsteps. Then a car engine in the background. A few moments later, he spoke again. I think someone searched my apartment. I closed my eyes. Of course. Vesper had probably assumed the documents were there. When she failed to find them, she had sent someone else. Or perhaps she had returned herself. What exactly happened? I asked. My drawers are open. My office has been torn apart. I felt anger rising, not toward my son, toward the people who had dragged him into this. Dad, I'm scared. Those words hurt more than I expected, because despite everything, he was still my son, still the boy who once ran into my arms after scraping his knee, still the child Alira loved more than anything. Listen to me, I said calmly. Go to the Harborview Hotel. Book a room. Stay there. Okay. And don't tell anyone where you are. Okay. After ending the call, the room became silent. Cedric slowly folded his arms. This is becoming serious. It already is. I looked at the letters once more. Then another thought suddenly occurred to me. What if there is something else inside the car? Cedric frowned. We already inspected it.
No.
What if Alira expected someone to find the first compartment? He stared at me. I immediately walked toward the Aston. For years, I had watched Alira work on this vehicle. I knew her habits, her methods. She was meticulous. If she had hidden one secret, there might be another. I carefully examined the dashboard. Nothing. The trunk. Nothing. Then I looked beneath the steering wheel. There was a tiny engraving. Almost invisible. A small symbol. 3 circles. I froze. I had seen it before. On one of the photographs. I quickly returned to the desk and searched through the pile.
There.
One picture showed Alira's father standing beside a warehouse. And on the building's entrance was the exact same symbol. 3 circles. Cedric stepped closer. What does it mean? I don't know. Then I turned over the photograph. My breathing stopped. A single sentence had been written on the back. The key is not in the car. It is in Belmere. At that exact moment, someone knocked loudly on the workshop door. Both Cedric and I looked up. One of the mechanics entered. His face was pale. Mr. Morrow. What is it? The mechanic swallowed. There's a woman outside asking about Mr. Hale. A heavy silence filled the room. I already knew the answer before asking. What does she look like? The mechanic hesitated.
Tall.
Dark hair. Expensive coat. Cedric slowly looked at me. My heart began beating faster. Because there was only one person it could be. Then the mechanic said the name. She said her name is Vesper Thorne. The room suddenly felt very small. Because after all these years of secrets and hidden letters, the real game had finally begun. For several seconds, neither Cedric nor I moved. The mechanic stood near the doorway, waiting for instructions. Are you certain? Cedric asked. The man nodded nervously. She specifically asked if Mr. Selim Hale was here. I slowly exhaled.
So she had found me.
The question was how. Had she followed me? Had she somehow known I would come here? Or had she simply guessed that the dealership owner would contact me? No matter the answer, one thing was clear. Vesper was desperate. Cedric looked at me. What do you want to do? I stared toward the workshop entrance. A part of me wanted to walk outside immediately and demand answers. Another part warned me to be careful. Elira had hidden these documents for decades. People did not do that without reason. Where is she now?
I asked.
In the showroom. I nodded slowly. Bring her here. Cedric looked surprised. You want to meet her? Yes. A few moments later, footsteps echoed through the workshop. Then she appeared. Vesper Thorne looked exactly as she always had. Elegant. Perfectly composed. Dark hair, neatly arranged. A cream-colored coat that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Yet something was different. For the first time since I had known her, her calm expression looked forced. Her eyes immediately moved toward the wooden box on the desk. There it was. The first crack.
She was not looking at me.
She was looking at the documents. Mr. Hale, she said softly. I remained silent. Her gaze finally met mine. I've been trying to contact you. I know. I think there has been a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. A misunderstanding. My late wife's car had been sold. Hidden documents had been discovered. My son's apartment had been searched, and she called it a misunderstanding. Cedric quietly stepped beside me. Vesper's expression briefly hardened. You involved other people. I looked at her carefully. You came here looking for something? Her eyes narrowed slightly. I came because Liz is worried.
No.
I shook my head. You came because of the documents. Silence. For the first time, she did not immediately answer. That alone was enough. I slowly opened one of the envelopes. Her eyes instantly moved toward it. Interesting. Very interesting. You know exactly what these are, don't you? She crossed her arms. I know your wife was hiding things. And how would you know that? Another silence. Then she smiled. But it was no longer the warm smile I had seen during family dinners. It was cold, measured. My family knew Elira's father. I said nothing. My grandfather worked with him many years ago. I immediately remembered the photograph. The man standing beside Elira's father. The resemblance. Vesper's father. This was bigger than I had imagined. You've been looking for these papers. She slowly exhaled. They belong to my family.
No.
I spoke calmly. They belong to my wife. For the first time, irritation appeared on her face. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain. Her jaw tightened, but she remained silent, because she could not explain without revealing too much. Cedric suddenly spoke. You called earlier asking specifically about hidden documents. She turned toward him. I was merely curious.
No.
I stepped forward. You already knew they existed. Another silence. Then she looked at me. Truly looked at me. And for the first time, I saw something behind her calm appearance.
Fear.
She was afraid, which meant these papers were far more important than I had realized. Where are the rest? She suddenly asked. I frowned. The rest? Her expression changed instantly, as if she had made a mistake. I carefully watched her. There are more documents? She remained silent. Interesting. Very interesting. Elira had left multiple clues. Belmere. Storage Unit 42. The three-circle symbol. And now this. More documents. Perhaps she had never intended for everything to remain inside the Aston. Perhaps this had only been the beginning. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. Vesper stared at me for several long seconds. Then she slowly smiled again. You should ask your son. The words hit me unexpectedly. My son. Yes. I immediately felt uneasy. What do you mean? She tilted her head slightly. You believe Liz is innocent. My chest tightened. Be careful with your next words. She ignored the warning. Did he tell you why he was so eager to sell the car? I stared at her. He said the money was for Paris. Her smile widened slightly. And you believed him? A terrible feeling suddenly appeared inside me, because I realized something. I had never actually verified my son's story. I had simply accepted it. Vesper slowly folded her arms. He wasn't forced to sell the car. I remained silent. He wanted money. For what? She looked directly into my eyes. For debt. The room suddenly became quiet.
No.
Her expression did not change. He invested in several failed projects. I felt my stomach sink. He borrowed money.
No.
He lost almost everything. I looked at her, unable to speak, because suddenly many things began making sense. The urgency, the rushed sale, the low price. Liz had needed money.
Badly.
He never told you, did he? She asked softly. I remembered all the times my son had insisted he was doing well. All the times he had smiled. All the times he had avoided discussing finances. I suddenly felt old. Very old. How much had happened without me noticing? Vesper's voice became quieter. I did not manipulate him. I looked at her. He came to me for help. I wanted to deny it. I truly did. But doubt had already entered my mind. Then my phone suddenly rang.
Liz.
I answered immediately.
Dad. His voice was shaking.
Dad, someone is following me. I straightened.
What?
I left the hotel to buy food, and a black SUV has been behind me for 20 minutes. My heart began pounding. Where are you? He quickly mentioned a street name. Cedric immediately recognized it. That's only 15 minutes from here. I looked toward Vesper. She appeared genuinely surprised.
No.
More than surprised.
Concerned.
Dad, I'm scared. Stay in your car. The line suddenly filled with static. Then I heard my son shout, "Oh God!" Less. The sound of tires screeching echoed through the phone. Then the call disconnected. For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. Less. No answer. I called again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. For several seconds, nobody moved. The workshop had become completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. Someone had my son. Or, at the very least, someone had intercepted him. I looked directly at Vesper. What do you mean, other people? She swallowed. For the first time since arriving, her confidence had completely disappeared. My grandfather wasn't the only person searching for those records. What records? She hesitated. Then she finally spoke. The documents concern ownership transfers from decades ago. Some people became very wealthy because those records disappeared. Cedric frowned. And some people became criminals. She slowly nodded. I stared at her. You knew this all along. I knew parts of it, and yet you still involved my son. Pain briefly crossed her face. I never intended for him to be hurt. I almost laughed. After everything that had happened, those words meant very little. My phone suddenly vibrated. An unknown number. I immediately answered. Hello. A man's voice spoke calmly. Mr. Hale. Who is this? I believe your son is with us. My entire body froze. Cedric's face immediately darkened. What do you want? A short silence followed. The documents. I closed my eyes. So this was what it had always been about. Not money. Not Paris. Not even the car itself. The documents. Is my son alive? At the moment, the answer made my blood run cold. Let me speak to him. A few seconds passed. Then I heard breathing. Dad. Liz sounded terrified. I'm sorry. The line shifted. The unknown man returned. Storage Unit 42. I frowned. You know about Belmere. We know many things. What exactly do you want? Bring every document. And then, you get your son back. The line disconnected. Silence filled the room. Cedric slowly sat down. This just became far worse. I looked at Vesper. She looked horrified. You knew these people. I knew they existed. Who are they? She shook her head. I don't know names. I clenched my jaw. For years, Elira had been protecting something dangerous. And now her son had become trapped in the middle of it. I looked at the letters again. Then I remembered something. One final envelope remained unopened. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The date written on the back was only 3 months before Elira died. I carefully opened it. Inside was a single page. Selim, if you are reading this, events have become worse than I feared. There is only one person I trust besides you. His name is Arthur Vale. He owns the old railway office in Belmere. He knows the truth. I frowned. Arthur Vale. Another name. Another piece of the puzzle. The letter continued. Please remember something important. The records themselves are not valuable. The real value lies in the evidence hidden with them. If dangerous people seek these papers, it means they fear exposure. I slowly lowered the page. Evidence. Not money. Not inheritance. Exposure. Cedric leaned closer. What else does it say? I read the final lines. Storage Unit 42 contains copies only. The originals are somewhere safer. Trust nobody until you understand everything. I looked up. Copies. Which meant even now, everyone was chasing incomplete information, including the people who had taken my son. I suddenly understood why Elira had hidden everything. She had created layers. Protection after protection. She had anticipated betrayal. Even after her death. I slowly folded the letter. We're going to Belmere. Cedric nodded immediately. I'll drive. Vesper stepped forward. I should come. I looked at her. Why? Because I know things you don't. I considered refusing, but time was running out. And whether I liked it or not, she had become part of this story. 3 hours later, we arrived in Belmere. The town was quiet and old. Many buildings looked abandoned. The railway office stood near the edge of town. Its faded sign barely remained attached. An elderly man opened the door before we even knocked.
He looked directly at me.
Selim Hale. I blinked. You know who I am? He sighed softly. I knew your wife would eventually send you. Arthur Vale looked almost 80 years old, yet his eyes remained sharp. He invited us inside. The office smelled of dust and old paper. On the wall hung several black and white photographs. Then I noticed one of them. Elira, much younger, standing beside Arthur. I stared at him. You knew her well. Since she was a child.
He slowly sat down.
She was brave. I felt my chest tighten. Please tell me where my son is. Arthur nodded. First, you need to understand something. He opened an old cabinet and removed several files. Inside were newspaper clippings, court records, photographs. Then he placed one picture before me. I froze. It showed several men. One of them was Vesper's father. Another was someone I had never seen before. And another was Arthur himself. What is this? Arthur looked tired. 40 years ago, several businessmen illegally claimed ownership of valuable collections by making documents disappear. I slowly looked through the papers.
Forgery. Fraud.
Bribery. Everything was there. The originals proving their crimes still exist, Arthur said quietly. And they fear those originals. I suddenly understood. The people searching for the documents were not trying to become rich. They were trying to erase evidence. To protect themselves. Arthur looked at me. Your wife protected those records after her father's death. I lowered my head. Even now, I still kept discovering new sides of Elira. Arthur then handed me a small key. Storage Unit 42. We immediately drove there. The storage facility stood outside town.
Old.
Nearly forgotten. Inside Unit 42 was a metal box. Nothing more. I opened it. Inside were copies of records. And a single envelope, addressed to me. I opened it immediately. Selim, if you have reached this point, then you finally know the truth. The originals are already safe. I gave them to federal investigators 2 years ago. I stopped breathing.